And just like that, we are back with another Autumn Nations fantasy. Six Nations is probably where I get the most traction on my channel, but Autumn Nations is definitely a close second. And as you can see, if you've been on the game already, it's newly revamped, and I think actually pretty good. It keeps getting better and better, which we cannot complain about. However, something that we can definitely complain about is the fact that we can only pick from the Six Nations sides in this Autumn Nations. So actually, half of the teams playing, i.e. New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, Fiji, etc., we just can't pick players from. I think it must be a rights issue. So for this week one, we've got England versus New Zealand and Scotland, Fiji. We just can't pick from New Zealand or Fiji, which is a real shame because it just takes, well, personally for me, pretty much all the fun out of the fantasy, as you just have to pick specific teams. I was going to make a separate video on this, essentially just having a bit of a rant, to be honest, but I think it's best to just put it at the start of the team selection video, because you guys are probably also aware it's not ideal and not what we want, but it's unfortunately what we've got for now. As I always say, if you are new around here, then please subscribe to the channel. We're pretty much the only YouTube rugby fantasy channel. Don't hold me to that, but we got a pretty good community going, as I always say, and always reply to comments as well, so get involved. So looking over the teams then, I have put the All Blacks and Fiji starting the lineup in here. I guess it is still important, right, because England will be playing New Zealand, so you have to maybe strategize a little bit against who they're playing. But yes, very frustrating because I can see Will Jordan is at 15 and obviously really wanted to pick him, but we can't do that. So maybe moving on to the England matchday squad, and yeah, it's pretty decent to be fair. They've got a good mix of like experienced players, but then players who have, let's say, 10 to 20 caps, which I think is a really good threshold. And the Autumn Nations is, I think, a pretty good way to set them up for, well, the Six Nations, which is as close to the World Cup as possible. And as for the Fiji-Scotland game, Fiji have quite a few players that I personally haven't heard of before. Before we couldn't pick them, I was tempted to pick some of their backs because they always, obviously, just light up the game. But yeah, not heard too much of them, to be honest. And on the flip side, Scotland's team is actually pretty strong. They've gone pretty much all out. Obviously, Finn Russell is still with Bath, so he's not here, so Adam Hastings is starting. But apart from that, I would say that's pretty much their starting team. So without further ado, I think we'll get into the side. So, obviously, remembering we can only pick from two teams this week. In the front row, I've gone Ellis Genge, Jamie George, and Pierre Schoeman. I think these are probably maybe the strongest ball carriers. I would imagine with Jamie George, he would stay on the pitch, well, given he's the captain, for most of the 80 minutes, let's hope. And obviously England are wanting to play maybe a more forward-dominated game against New Zealand, given the 6-2 split on the bench. So we'll have to see. Ellis Genge, we also know what he can do, carrying ability, which gets you good points in fantasy. And Schoeman as well, I mean, he's very similar, right? Gets a try here or there and is quite good for fantasy. Only thing is, I think a lot of people will be picking this front row just because there's not many options to pick from. I have gone a little differential in the second row though. So I have gone with George Martin, who is a second row but does play a bit like a six. So I'm hoping He can get his hands on the ball. Doesn't make too many meters, to be fair, but does make a good amount of carries. But he also is pretty damn good at turning the ball over and his defence. Brilliant chop tackler and getting over the ball, so hoping he can get a few of them. And also Scott Cummins, I just think he finds himself in wide areas sometimes, and I think against Fiji, the game just might open up. I do expect him or Gilchrist to be taken off early, and I'm hoping it will be Gilchrist, just given the age factor. And then in the back row, very oddly, let's say, I have gone full England, and against a New Zealand back row, which consists of Ardie Savea, Satiti, I think maybe I'm playing my cards wrong, but who knows. I think Ben Earl, we all know what he can do. If you played World Cup Fantasy, he was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, just a star of fantasy. So if you don't have him in your team, get him in your team. Also, a great captain option just for every game week, to be honest. Cunningham South, I do expect him to get rotated for Don Brandt, probably around 55-60 minutes. But what can he do in that meantime? I think he's just there to carry the ball pretty darn hard, to be honest. And Tom Curry, I'm hoping, again, Ben Curry is on the bench, so will probably be rotated after injuries. Tom Curry just gets himself a nuisance, right? Ardie Savea has been talking about him in the week, just being really tough and strong over the ball, which is what I'm hoping for. In my halfbacks, I've gone Ali Price. Obviously against Fiji, I did have the option of Spencer, but I just think maybe Randall on the bench, they want to inject some pace. I think Spencer's probably there to just set up the game, box kicking, kicking smart, that sort of stuff. Whereas Ali Price against Fiji, I probably think there's just more room to get some points. And Marcus Smith, well, what can you say about him? I think brilliant player. Ford is on the bench as a vice captain. I do think if they are to bring Ford on, Smith will stay on the pitch and potentially go to fullback. That does mean taking Furbank off. I'm not sure how it will play out. Maybe they will take Smith off, but that's the way I see it. I think they see Smith as being a pretty important cog in this England side. In the centres, I've gone Ollie Lawrence and Hugh Jones. So obviously we can only pick 8 players from each team. Obviously wanted to pick Tui Polotu, but you'll see later my reasonings for not doing that. And I'll explain a bit now. Hugh Jones, we all know in that 13 channel, if they can just fizz the ball to him, there will be space and he will make meters. That's just what he does, and also just loves a try as well. Ollie Lawrence is actually probably quite similar to Tui Polotu. Really good ball carrier, gets over the gain line. Similar to Jones though, Lawrence does find himself on the edge sometimes, especially in the 22. I think he scored maybe his first try against Wales in the corner, if I remember correctly. So Lawrence, I think he was Prem Player of the Year last year as well. So all round, I think decent centre pairing. And now, in the back three, you'll see all Scotland. Is this just maybe my England bias? I call it an England bias. It's a non-bias because I just haven't backed them against that New Zealand backline, to be honest. Feu Boso, we obviously know, absolutely brilliant player, what he can do. And to be fair, similar to Freeman, just all-round solid. I think just the fixture against Fiji, the Scottish back three have just enticed me. Darcy Graham is back and gets the captaincy for me. I just feel this is more of his game than a Van der Merwe. Van der Merwe shows up in the big games, whereas Graham, the amount of space that we will be on the pitch against Fiji, I think he'll just thrive. And I have gone for Kyle Rowe, which I maybe should have gone for a Furbank or Feu Boso, but I've just backed the whole back three, to be honest. Looking at Scotland's bench, I don't know if any of these are going to get rotated. So I just think by picking Rowe at fullback, I think they are just planning for a non-kicking game and more of a running game, to be honest, which I'm hoping for. And then on the bench, there's one bench spot. My super sub is Stafford McDowell. So he is a centre, usually a 12, I believe. So that's my thinking with not putting Tuipulotu in. Maybe he's going to be substituted. A fresh captain, they might want to just maybe give him a round of applause at Murrayfield. Who knows? He could very well come off for Hugh Jones as well. But I've gone for Stafford McDowell because he's the only essentially outside back that's on the bench. So I'd say hoping. I'm not hoping for an injury, but I am hoping for an early substitution from an outside back so that McDowell can come on and essentially just carry the ball. I think a 6'4" Scottish lad in the centre is the last thing the Fijians want to see at 60, 70 minutes after they've been run ragged. So that's my thinking there. Do let me know what you think down in the comments. Obviously we can only pick, basically split the team in half, Scotland, England. I think I've weighted it quite appropriately. I'm hoping Scotland game is more free-flowing, i.e. picking more backs from Scotland. And the England game, obviously they want to focus on the pack and beating New Zealand up, as they did in the World Cup semi-final, which is why I picked more forwards. Hoping the game plan works, but obviously I didn't have much choice. So you'll hear a lot of that saltiness throughout the tournament. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comments, just overall about the game, but also your sides as well. Good luck everyone with week 0 it is. We'll kick off week 1 fully next week. And I'll see you all in the next one.